Hey folks, I'm Dennis. We've got a little dog and we wanted a dog perch so that she can lay on the perch on a little bed in the window. Today I'm going to show you how I built it. Let's get started. First thing we did was picked out the bed that we wanted for her. She's a small dog, so we didn't need a real big bed, but you could size yours accordingly. And so this one measures roughly 22.5 deep, 27.5 wide. So that'll be the size that I use to build the top for the perch. So I took some 3/4 ash that I'll stain and I glued it up. I'm not gonna bore you with details of like joining the lumber and gluing everything up, because if you do woodworking you already know how to do that. I'm just basically going over the plans of how I did it. I glued up some 3/4 ash to the size of the bed. The depth of the bed is about 4 inches deep, so I cut 3 pieces of ash 3.5 wide to fit the sides and the back, and then the back. And what I'll do is I'll take the front edge of both sides and round that off on a radius so that you don't have to worry about the dog hitting the sharp edge or anything. So these are also 3/4 thick stock. I cut the back to match the width of the bed so that it's flush on each edge, and then I cut the sides so that it'll come back and be flush on the back edge of the back piece and flush on the front. Okay, so on my particular example, I'm using 3.5 inch stock. The thickness of the top is 3/4. I want to radius this front corner off. I want the radius to start on the top of the top surface, so I want that radius to start 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom surface of this side. That makes sense. 3.5 minus 3/4 is 2 3/4. So I'm going to set my compass at 2 3/4. So I'm going to come down from the top, 2 3/4. I'm going to come back from the front edge, 2 3/4, and that'll be the center for my compass. Go to my point, my center, and I'm gonna scribe a arc at 2 3/4, and then I'm gonna take that and cut that on my bandsaw. All right, so got both of those done, one for each side. Now for the base, I just built the base out of poplar because I'm going to paint it. Again, I'm going to spare you from the glue up and whatnot, but I just took sticks of 1x2, which is 3/4 by 1.5 inch poplar, and glued those together to make 1.5 inch square legs. My dog is little, so I want the height of the table to be at about 17 inches. She can jump that fine, no problem. Since the top itself is 3/4, I cut the legs to 16 1/4. Once I glued them up, I ran them through the planer just to smooth them out, you know. I'll show you how to taper one leg, and then of course I'll do the other 3. In another video, I'll put a link above somewhere up here. I'll show you how to make this jig for doing slight angle cuts, 3 to 5 degrees, that kind of thing, 10 degrees, whatever. You can use it for anything even wider than that, but it's good for small angle cuts. So using this jig, I'm going to put a 5-degree taper up 3 inches on the leg on 2 sides, just to keep it from being square at the bottom, give it a little bit of character. And then that gives me a leg that's got taper on 2 sides, square on 2 sides. I'll have to fill that. I got a little knot in there. I'll take care of that later. But next, to make the skirt boards, cut the sides at 17 inches and the front and the back at 20.5. I ripped these to 3 inches wide just because I like the way 3 inches look. 1x4 lumber will be 3.5, but that was going to be a little bit too wide for my taste, so I cut them to 3 inches. I want to have the same arch on all 4 pieces. So I just took a stainless steel ruler and a piece of masking tape, and then I marked 4 inches from each end. I took the ruler, bent into this arc, and lined it up on both of my marks, and then just gently drew the line so I can cut that arc out on the bandsaw. I did that on both these pieces. On these shorter pieces, I measured in, forgot what it was, 3 inches in. So, but that gives me a nice consistent arc on all 4 pieces. You could also use like a thin piece of wood. It's going to bend in a nice smooth arc like this. So now I'll just take these pieces on the bandsaw and cut along this arc. If you don't have a bandsaw, you can do this with a jigsaw. If you don't have a jigsaw, you can do it with a coping saw, something like this. If you don't have any of those, then you could just leave them straight, or you could take like a small handsaw and cut some kind of pattern in it if you wanted to. All of my pieces are cut. Now what I recommend doing with anything like this that you're gonna finish is take you a spray bottle of water and set it on mist. You can do it with a rag if you don't have a sprayer. You can take a sponge or a rag or something and wring it out, just make it damp and wipe the surface. Just mist lightly all of these surfaces. The water makes they call it popping the grain. The water will make the grain swell up and then it'll dry and that raised part of the grain will stay. Sand that down smooth so then when you put stain, paint, clear finish or anything like that on it, the grain won't swell up and give you a poor finish. Just mist these pieces. Now after you let your wood dry, the next thing you want to do is sand all your surfaces. Typically with something like this, and I'm going to stain and clear coat, I'll start off with about 120 and then I'll go to 180 and then usually end up with 220 for like a stained and clear coated or a painted surface. A lot of people will stop at 180. That's fine, you know, whatever you prefer, that's your choice. And that's assuming that you've got wood that's been that's either sanded 4 sides or that's been through the plane or something like that. One of the great ways to make sure that you've sanded the whole surface, particularly on large surfaces, is just take a pencil and do that all over your surface. And then you'll know, once you've sanded all that off, you'll know that you've at least gotten all of it touched with your paper. And then I'm going to go through and sand all my skirt boards and my legs. Also, while you're sanding, particularly if you're using any kind of a power sander, pneumatic or electric, make sure that you wear a dust mask. You might even want to wear eye protection if you don't want to get sawdust in your eyes. So I've got my drill press set up with a drum sander. Now that I've got all my kind of basic sanding done, I've got everything sanded to a 220. I'm going to go ahead and glue the sides and the back to the top. I'm going to apply all my glue to the edges of the top piece. For interior stuff, I like to use Tite Bond 2. I just have it in a glue bot bottle. Spread some glue on this edge. Drop that down in there. Put this back piece in, line it up flush with my edges, and then clamp it down. And when you're clamping, you don't have to squeeze the daylights out of it. You're just trying to get it good and snug. And tighten them all up. Next, I'm going to get started on the base while my top is drying. So I've got my 4 skirt boards. I've set them up so I know which side I want to drill into. I'm going to use pocket hole screws. When I'm joining skirt boards to legs, normally what I want is a little bit of a reveal where the skirt board is set back just a touch from the leg. So I've got a whole box of these craft sticks or popsicle sticks, and they're pretty consistent in thickness, so I'll just use them. So I'm going to set this up so that I've got a stick between or under each end of the skirt board, and then I can flush up the top where the skirt board is on the leg. My experience with pocket hole screws is that they tend to sometimes twist the stock a little bit. So I'll generally clamp them together and then drive my screws so that it doesn't twist when I set the screws in there. Put a little bit of glue on the end of that. Then drive my screws. You get just a nice little reveal there. Get all 4 skirt boards put together, glued and screwed, and then the base will be ready for final sanding and paint. So there it is, put together, final sanding, and it'll be ready to paint. I've got the top and the base sanded. I took a piece of sandpaper in my hand and I broke all the corners just so they wouldn't be too sharp. Before I stain the top and paint the bottom, I'm gonna go ahead and work out the attachment underneath for the top to attach to the base. So I'm gonna flip that over, put this where I want it, and I'm gonna measure it up to be centered all the way around. Now the way I'm going to attach the top to the base in this case is the same way I do a lot of tables. I'm going to use these offset Z-clips. They got about a 3/16 offset and they've got a hole in one of the legs. I'll take my biscuit joiner and I'll cut slots where I'm going to put these. This part of the clip slips into the slot and then you screw that down. And what that does is it allows for movement in the wood, because this is an ash top and poplar base, so the wood's gonna expand and contract at different rates, number one. Secondly, wood generally expands across its grain with changes in humidity and such, so you particularly want there to be the ability for some movement between these two surfaces. First thing I'm gonna do is center this on each side. I'll mark lines on the inside of these skirt boards. So I'm gonna make a line there and there for that one. Placement doesn't have to be real critical. If you wanna measure it out and make it precise, you can. I'm gonna put 2 over here on this side. And then I'm gonna put 1 roughly in the middle on the front, on the back. In this case, where I just kind of eyeballed my Z-clip location, I'm going to put an F for front on the inside of this front skirt board, and that way I'll have it turned the correct way. Now what I do is I take my clips. This is this line indicates the inside of my skirt board. This line indicates the center of where I want this. I'm going to set this up so that I see the line through the hole. If it's not long enough, you can lengthen it. And then I want this line to go roughly halfway through this part of the clip. That's going to get roughly half of this clip engaged into the skirt board without being pressed all the way up against it. So now I'm allowing for movement in either direction. Place that like so, and then I can mark the center of the hole. Now I know where to drill my pilot hole. Now you want to size your drill bit to your screw, and if you're not real sure how to do that, basically what you want to do is when you look at a screw, you've got the threads and then you've got the main shank of the screw. Your drill bit should be roughly the size, the same diameter as the shank of that screw. You don't want it to be as big as including the outside of the threads, because then your hole's going to be too big. So you can just hold it up, eyeball it, make sure that the bit is no bigger than the shank of the screw. I want to make sure that I don't drill through the wood, because I don't want a hole in the top surface of this top. So I'm going to take just a small piece of masking tape from the head down. I don't want to drill any deeper than that. I don't really have to drill quite that deep either, because the screw is going to go through that Z-clip. So then I'm going to put my piece of masking tape like that, and now I know where to stop my hole. Okay, you're just going to go in there. You can center punch that if you want, if you're worried about your drill bit walking. Put on your mark, and then just drill until your tape hits. Now you know that the hole's not too deep. So I'm going to go through and drill all of these holes. Most biscuit joiners are pretty much the same. If you have one, you probably already know how to do all of this. You want to have your fence square. And then on these particular Z-clips that I'm using, they've got a 3/16 offset. So I want to the center of the leg. I want to set the depth on my biscuit joiner to 3/16. Then I will always test it on a scrap piece before I start cutting slots in my item. I've got the depth of my biscuit joiner set for 10 for a 10 size biscuit, so it's not too terribly deep. That'll put it about here, and take your Z-clip and test it out. So it's a little bit high, so I'm gonna probably lower it maybe a quarter of a turn and then go with that. I'm gonna cut my slot here on my line, and then I'm gonna go around and cut all the other grooves. But once you see how to do one, you got it. It's a little awkward because I'm reaching across the table and working around the camera, but so I've got it centered on my mark right here. Then you have a slot for that Z-clip to go into. It helps with a couple of things. One, you can align your top if you decide you got to move it around a little bit, you can align it. But that's what allows you the movement in the wood so that you don't split lumber. So I'm going to go around and cut all the rest of these grooves. The next step will be to paint the base and stain the top. I'm not going to show that in the video because that's going to all depend on how you finish yours. And then I'll show, once I've got the top stained and clear coated and the base painted and clear coated, then I'll show you how I'll put it together and the finished product. I've got it upside down. Remember, I marked on the inside of the front skirt what the front was. Line up this base with the holes that I drilled around here earlier. I don't snug them up until I've got them all in. Then before I tighten them down, I'm going to go back through and just check all my measurements to make sure that I've got it on there square before I tighten them all down. So that's how it looks completed. It's nice and stable for the dog. I don't have to worry about it tipping or anything like that. The little bed fits up there just fine. Now she can jump up there and enjoy her view out the window. Thanks for watching my video, folks. I appreciate it. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel below. And hope to see you back real soon. Take care and God bless you.